The American dream is rooted in our collective psyche. However, for millions of Americans, this dream may seem nearly unattainable. Those who are poor experience a daily challenge to make ends meet. They struggle to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. Food is one of the most basic needs. According to Feeding America, 1 in 7 Americans experiences hunger. And USDA statistics indicate that over 42 million people in the US were food insecure at some point in 2016. Families and individuals living in poverty also experience housing instability. A 2016 federal government report noted that more than 500,000 people were homeless, 35% of them families with children. Lack of stable housing and good nutrition impact the abilities of the poor to access adequate education and health care. For the 41 million Americans living at or below the federal poverty level, the ability to meet basic needs may seem nearly unattainable. In fact, research indicates that 54% of Americans will experience poverty once between the ages of 25 and 60. There are 2 official poverty measures. The poverty line is a federal income calculation developed in 1963 and still used today. It is based on a calculation related to the cost of food, with no consideration for the cost of living. In 2017, the poverty line for a single adult was $15,060 per year. For a family of 3, it was $25,520 per year. The supplemental poverty measure, developed in 2011 by the federal government, includes additional factors beyond those used for the poverty line measure. However, both of these measures tend to underreport the full extent of poverty. Given the limitations of official measures, 2 other ways to understand poverty have been established. First, asset poverty, an inability to access resources sufficient to provide for basic needs for a period of 3 months. And 2, relative poverty, lacking the minimum amount of income necessary to achieve an average standard of living in the local community. With the passage of the 2010 Affordable Care Act, which builds upon the 1965 Medicaid health insurance for the poor, many Americans can access health care. However, poor Americans still suffer from a variety of chronic physical and psychological health problems. Almost a third of those living in poverty experience depression, and they experience higher rates of asthma, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart attacks compared to those in a higher socioeconomic status. The effects of poverty may have long-lasting effects on children. Research has shown that children who experience poverty, particularly during early life or for an extended period, are at risk of a host of adverse health and developmental outcomes through their life course. Educational outcomes are often related to socioeconomic status. With limited access to free early childhood education programs, poor children are less prepared when they come to school, and individuals with greater exposure to poverty during childhood are less likely to escape poverty as adults. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2016, 12.7% of the population, or 40.6 million people, lived at or below the poverty line. During the Great Recession, more than 1 out of every 3 persons in the United States lived in poverty for 2 or more consecutive months. In California, the poverty rate is comparable to the national rate, with 14.3% of Californians, or over 5.6 million residents, classified as poor. Using the supplemental poverty measure that includes the cost of living, the 2016 percentage of poor in California was an estimated 20.4%, or 8 million people. In contrast, the average rate of poverty in the San Francisco Bay Area is 9.8%, with more rural counties having the highest levels of poverty. But poverty does not impact all ages, genders, and ethnic groups equally. The greatest percentage of the poor are children under the age of 18. Nearly 1 in 5 children in the United States lived in poverty in 2016. Disparities also exist by race. The 2016 federal census reports the poverty rate among Caucasians is 9%, as compared to 19% for Hispanics and 22% for African Americans. Women between the ages of 18 to 64 experience poverty at a greater rate than men do. For single female heads of households, the rate is twice as much as those headed by men. The group most impacted by poverty, however, are people with disabilities, with nearly 27% being poor. These percentages fluctuate over time, but typically within a narrow band. There are many causes of poverty, and these can be understood at 3 levels. First, macro-level factors play a key role in the distribution of wealth. Economic recessions expand poverty rates and restrict government programs. Discrimination in housing, employment, and lending practices have disproportionately affected people of color. Since the 1980s, income inequality has been spreading due to Congress and presidents having favored employers over workers. In addition, trade with countries that have low labor costs has been partially responsible for the rising wage gap between high and low-skilled workers. Second, community-level factors play a role in poverty. These include a lack of access to quality education, including early childhood education, affordable housing, high-quality fresh food, and affordable health care. Third, conditions that exist at the individual and family level that also contribute to poverty. People who don't possess a high school diploma are almost twice as likely to live in poverty than those who have one. Single-parent households, particularly those headed by women, are at far greater risk of living in poverty. And physically or cognitively disabled individuals who are more frequently unemployed or underemployed frequently live at or below the poverty line. While too many Americans suffer poverty every day, we have made tremendous progress through programs such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, food stamps, temporary aid for needy families, the Child Tax Credit, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and subsidies for housing, jobs, and child care. From 1967 to 2016, child poverty rates have been cut in half. Though the challenges of addressing poverty in the United States are numerous, they are not insurmountable. There are reasons to be optimistic because of the demonstrated strengths, resilience, and coping skills of the people who experience poverty, the commitment of human service staff to the ongoing refinement of programs designed to improve opportunities for the poor, and the dedication of communal institutions, governmental, nonprofit partners, and universities to increasing our understanding of poverty and the social policies needed to address poverty. Since the early years of social services, many of those experiencing poverty have been able to access resources, formal and informal, external and internal, in ways that have led them out of poverty. We need to continue the work of previous generations and renew the effort to reduce poverty in our lifetime.